So, hello again, and welcome to part two of the production module. Today we'll be discussing the production function. And so the background for today is San Bernardino, California in the US of A. Um, so there's a very important fast food chain that was started here in San Bernardino. Can anyone guess what that is? If you guess McDonald's, you're correct. So basically, this is the first McDonald's that was ever that was founded. Basically, so this is before McDonald's became a corporation when it was just owned by a single family. This location right now, McDonald's doesn't exist there anymore. It's a museum now commemorating McDonald's. So we'll be discussing something today about burgers. We'll be using that as a case study today when we talk about production. All right, so let's begin. So let's start off with a recap. So last time we talked about the different factors of production. Remember that we had four of them: land, labor, capital, and then the new one, which is entrepreneurship. So you can see they do have symbols. And again, factors of production, these are just inputs that we put in to make our goods and services. All right. So let's have a focus that. Okay, so basically, once again, all these four factors of production come together to create goods and services. I hope that's simple and clear enough. However, let's imagine now that we increase the number of factors of production that we have. So that would mean we would be expecting that we increase the number of goods and services we make, right? So, for example, if you say you were trying to produce, I don't know, let's say a burger, and then you had more raw ingredients, then that means you could make more burgers, right? So you could make more goods and services if you had more materials, you had more factors of production. I hope that's clear. Okay, now, so that means then that the amount of goods and services that we have depends on the amount of factors of production that we have, right? We can put it in this way. We can say the amount of goods that we have depends on the amount of factors of production that we have. In mathematical language, we say that uh, so basically we could replace that with an F. So F basically means it depends on. Okay, don't be afraid. We're gonna try to make the maths here a bit more tractable. But basically, when you see the word F, and this is true for any um, any stuff in mathematics, whether you're doing this in pure maths or you're doing this in economics or whether you're doing this in coding, F basically just means a function, basically just means it depends on. All right, so this means once again that the amount of goods and services we produce depends on the amount of land, the amount of labor, the amount of capital, and the amount of entrepreneurship that we put in to produce the good. All right. So again, so I hope that's clear. And from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. We'll try to make the maths a bit easier this time. All right. So let's focus on that. So let's study first. And let's make it simple. Let's focus first on what happens when we increase just one factor while keeping the rest constant. So let's focus on labor, for example. So what happens if we increase labor, just the amount of labor that we have, but we got the same number of land or raw materials, or yeah, we've got the same number of capital, and we've got the same number of entrepreneurship. What happens to our the number of goods that we produce? And this concept of just increasing one factor while keeping the rest constant, this is a very popular concept in economics. And economists have a term for that. We call it ceteris paribus, which is Latin for other things being equal. So we say we increase labor, ceteris paribus, meaning other things being equal, so we keep the rest constant, and then we say, okay, what happens then? All right, let's move on. Let's start with a case study. Again, we started off with McDonald's because this is what we're going to study. We're going to use as an analysis for us to study the effect of changing the inputs, the factors of production, and see what happens to our outputs. Okay, so this is a McDonald's store in Japan. I will just use the simple case of burgers. It doesn't have to be McDonald's burgers, but you can think of it as McDonald's. You can think of it as something else. All right. So let's try increasing labor. Again, ceteris paribus, increasing labor, but all other inputs are the same. Okay, let's see, what do we expect? Just from your normal concept, right? Let's say from a very intuitive and common sense place. So let's say we've got one chef here, Bob, and so Bob makes 5 burgers. All right. And now let's say you're the owner of the burger company and you've hired Tom. So we expect, because assuming Tom is the same skill level as Bob, he's not better, he's not worse, they're relatively the same. You can expect Tom will also produce 5 burgers, right? For a total of 10 burgers in total. In reality, however, if we hire Tom, he might just produce three burgers. He'll produce less than 5. And why is that? Is it because Tom is just not good at his job? No. Again, we said Tom is just as good as Bob. And the reason for that is both of them are just using one grill, right? We've only increased labor, so we've only increased the amount of people that we have working to make burgers, but we haven't increased capital. So we've got just one grill over here, and they're basically crowding together, trying to share that one grill. So basically, the production of Bob and Tom will be lower, right? So they'll still produce more burgers together than if Bob was just on his own, but because it's only one grill, they'll be sharing that, and the increase in production will not be as much as we'd expect it to be. Okay, so this is what happens when we increase labor, but all other inputs are the same. Let's move on. So the different ways that we can quantify production. So a very basic one would be to just count the total number of products that we have, and that's the total product. Okay, so if you count there, we've got, bring my laser pointer out again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 burgers. All right. However, we could also quantify it in a per person basis, where we basically have number of product that we have. So we have our 8 burgers divided by 2 workers, or 2 chefs, 2 people, and we get, if you do some simple mathematics, 8 divided by 2, that will give us 4 burgers per worker, and we call this the average product. Okay, so we've got total product, which is just the sum total of all the products made, and we got the average product where we divide by the number of workers or the number of inputs. All right. Now, let's introduce another worker. Let's call him Harry. So Harry here is green. Maybe he's vegan or something like that. And and his addition brings just one more burger to our production line. Again, it's much less than what we expect because, again, they're sharing one grill. So the total product now, if we do the same analysis we did, the product now, so we used to have 8, but with Harry on, we now have 9 burgers. And the average product, again, we've got the total product, which is 9 burgers divided by 3 workers, because now we've got Harry in, and so now we have 3 workers instead of 2. So 9 divided by 3, that will be 3 burgers per worker. And by the way, just a side note, the decrease in the number of burgers per new worker isn't constant, like it's always going to be 2. I've made it that way just to make the division a lot easier. Okay, so don't get the impression that it's always -2. It's just I just decided to put it that way, so the maths will be easy. 9 divided by 3 is 3, no remainder, right? Easy life. However, there's another also. So we've got total product, we've got average product, but there's also the question of how much more burgers does Harry bring? So with just Bob and Tom, we've got 8 burgers, but with Harry, we've got now an additional 1 burger. And so that's what we call the marginal product, which is the additional amount of product that a worker or an additional input brings. I hope that's clear. So again, we've got 3 kinds of ways to quantify production. We've got the total number of products, we've got the average product, and we've got the marginal product. Okay? We'll work on this later on. I'll show you some more examples so that we can drill this concept in. Okay, so as a helpful mnemonic, marginal product means the margin. So that means plus when I add in 1 more worker, so he's at the margin, how much more product do I get? How much more burgers do I get? I hope that's clear. Right. And for some textbook definitions, kind of have to do this. You're right. You know the drill. There's a note there. So if you want to fill up your handouts, please do so. If you find with the fill up handouts, listen along. So again, we got three products: total, average, and marginal. So the total product is the total quantity of output produced for a given quantity of inputs. The average product is the amount of output for each unit of input. And the marginal product is the additional output produced when one additional unit of input is employed. Okay, that's a textbook definition, but I hope with the burger example and the coming more burger example, you'll be able to understand, differentiate between these three. Okay, so let's use tables. All right, so we've got number of workers, we've got the total product, we've got average product, and we've got marginal product. So here's our notepad for us to do some computation for average product to make it easier. This is a number of workers here, and this is our product. So in the beginning, if we've got 0 workers, you wouldn't be able to make any burgers. So total product would be 0. And average product, well, you can't divide by 0, can you? Just make stuff blow up, so we don't divide by that. And marginal product, you're not introducing anyone, so we don't really have a marginal product. Okay, so that's just going to be not a number. Not 0, just not a number. Okay, so let's have one worker come in. So you can, maybe there's Bob, maybe there's Tom, maybe, okay, let's call him Bob. So let's have Bob coming in, and Bob produces, by his own, he produces 7 burgers. So that's our total product. We've got 7 burgers here. Laser pointer out again. I should just keep that up. So we've got 7 burgers over here from Bob, and so our total product is 7. Now let's compute so marginal product will also be 7, because when we introduce Bob over here, he's given us an additional 7 burgers from 0, right? So that will be a marginal product. Now to compute average product, again we've got 7 burgers, and then 7 burgers here, and then we've got 1 worker there, so 7 divided by 1, that gives us 7 burgers per worker. I didn't have space to put the units in, but please do put the units in. So that's our average product. Alright, there. Now let's bring Tom in. So Tom, now we've got 2 workers, brings an additional 5 burgers, right? So the marginal product for Tom would be 5, because he brings an extra 5 burgers in. Okay? Now, the total product is just the sum of this, which is 7 plus 5, which will be 12. And again, average product, number of burgers that we have is 12. Number of workers, 2. We get 6. All right. So, what's that? Let's bring a third worker in, Harry, and he brings 3 more burgers in. So marginal product would be 3. And the total product, again, we just add up all of these. We knew this is 12. 12 plus 3, that would be 15. Okay, if you're not really convinced, you could count that out by yourself. Again, it's 15. I can assure you of that. And the average product again. So we got 15 burgers, 3 workers, and that will give us 5 for our average product. And the process goes on and on. Okay, if we got the 4th person, he brings in just 1. Okay, so the marginal product will be, total product will be 16, and then marginal product will be just 1, right? And average product, again, there are 16 burgers for 4 workers now, because now there's 4 of them, and we get 4 for our average product. And let's say we add in a 5th worker, but because the grill is just too crowded, he doesn't really add any more product. Like, the number of burgers made is just the same, because they're all basically just crowding into one grill and nothing, and he's basically, nothing is actually, there's no added productivity to that. So, marginal product, he brings in, the addition of another laborer brings in 0. So no new burgers are added with the additional worker. The total product will still be 16, right? Because nothing was added. We already have 16. And then we got 16 burgers, again for average product, 16 burgers, and then divided by 5 workers, we get 3.2. Alright? So that's the average product. I don't know if the slides will be given to you, but if they are, you can just check out the mathematics, double check the mathematics later. And again, it doesn't mean that there's always -2 each time. It's just, it just makes the maths easier. It makes everything divisible. I've deliberately chosen numbers so that they'll be divisible, so we'll have an easier time doing that. Okay, so now we've got a table, and I hope that wasn't too bad on how we construct the table. And usually in sciences or in in, yeah, in any academic setting, we usually do like to when we have a table. Sometimes it'd be nice to see what they look like graphed out. Okay, so we start first with number of workers because these are inputs, right? So all products, these are outputs. The three products that we have, this is a measure of the output. Number of workers is a measure of the input. So we want to put this on the x-axis, all right? So x-axis number of workers. Let's bring that in. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since we got 5 workers in total, and then we got total product. Let's look at total product first. So let's put that in the y-axis, and there we go. We'll put the in. I'm hope if you don't really have that much experience with graphing, this will be a simple way to do it. Hopefully you would have some sort of knowledge of graphing, but if not, don't be afraid. Again, don't panic. We will do this one at a time. All right. The first one is at 0, 0. So x is 0, that will be here, and total product is 0, so it will be there. Okay, so that's our first point. Second point, we've got 1, so we follow this up 1, and we got until, so y will be 7. So we go all the way up to 7, so that will be here. All right. Next, we got 2, this pair. We got 2 and 12, so 2 and all the way till 12. Next, we got 3, and then the product will be 15. So it will be somewhere over there. Yep. And then next is 4 and 16, and then 5 and 16. So that's our graph. Now let's have a look at this behavior. So as we increase the number of workers, so as we go from left to right, so left to right over there, we see that the number of total product increases, right? But it starts slowing down. It starts plateauing. So its behavior increases, but it plateaus. Now, for the more mathematical view, this is what we call an asymptotic behavior. Okay, which means that there is a limiting value. There is some sort of plateau. It doesn't just go on forever. It doesn't just it does keep increasing, but it doesn't go on. It doesn't just go on till infinity. So that's what we call an asymptotic behavior. Okay. Now let's do the same thing. I'm not going to show it to you step by step. Let's just do that. So now this is the average product on the y-axis, and still again number of workers. So this is our inputs, right? Still inputs on the x-axis, outputs on the y-axis, except this time we're looking at the average product. So as you can see, as we increase the number of workers, the number of product that each worker makes on average goes down. Okay, and we expect that because again they're crowding on the grill, so they can make less product per person, right? And again, behavior this time is decreasing. Now the marginal product, so again, let's make a new graph where this time we've got number of workers still in the x, and marginal product is on the y-axis. This time, as you can see, it goes down again. With each new worker, the additional product that they bring out decreases all the way until they reach 0, which means adding more workers doesn't really do anything to productivity. It just because they're just way too, in terms of burgers, right? They're just way too crowded on the grill, so they can't really do much. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so basically that's it. All right. I hope this made sense on how we translate from tables to graphs. But just in case, let's have an example from the book. Okay, so from this your textbook. I just pulled the numbers out of there, and unfortunately, while I can make handmade graphs, I prefer to just use software for this. Okay, so x-axis of workers, y-axis total product. So this was done on MATLAB. I apologize. It was far easier to do this. So as you can see here, the number of workers increase, right? Go from left to right. If you go that way, the total product increases. So as you can see, it goes up, but then it plateaus. So it reaches a limiting value where basically, so the increase kind of holds down. So it's asymptotic, as I have said. Let's now look at average product. So for average product, again, as we increase the number of workers, the average product decreases. So we've got less and less product per person on average as we increase the number of workers. Let's look now at marginal product. Okay. So for marginal product, again, we see the same thing for average product. It decreases. So the additional input from each worker decreases as we increase the number of workers until at the final worker, there's zero. Basically, no new productivity is added to, no new productivity is added for each worker. Okay, I hope that's clear. So this brings us to the law of diminishing returns. So again, so the law of diminishing returns basically states that as employment of an input increases, the marginal output of the product decreases. Okay, so you can see that from the graph beforehand, where we increase the number of workers and slowly it goes down. The behavior goes down. Okay, and so this is a quite famous law basically. It doesn't just apply to products, it applies to so many other things in life. It applies to satisfaction. Actually, there is a study where the more money you make, the less happier you'll be with each increment of money. So the amount of happiness you gain from earning, say, a monthly salary of 30,000 to 50,000 pesos will be much higher compared to, say, if you had a raise from 100,000 to 120,000. Okay, so law of diminishing returns, it's a law basically. It's something that we kind of observe a lot in reality, especially in economics. Okay, so that's law of diminishing returns. Now I want to present to you some caveat from our analysis. Okay, now that you've understand what the three ways to quantify products are: total, average, and marginal product. You've had a look at what the law of diminishing returns says, and we've had an example of that. I want to point out some caveats about the analysis that we made. Okay, so first of all, marginal output does not necessarily reflect the ability of an added worker. I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. So let's start first with our two characters, Bob. Well, Bob's alone first, and there's a single grill. And Bob can produce 5 burgers and by his own. Then when Tom comes in, because they're sharing the grill, only 3 more burgers are added. This does not mean that Tom only produces 3 burgers. Okay, this does not reflect that the increase in the total product, the marginal product, is not a reflection of Tom's abilities of working. It might be possible that Tom's actually making 4 burgers, okay, because he's crowded with the grill, and then Bob also makes another 4, given 8. What happens here? Basically, Tom also does his share of work and makes burgers, but now that the grill is being crowded, Bob can't be at the grill as often as he likes, or often as he needs, so his productivity goes down. And as you can see, again, so we got 3 as a marginal output, but that doesn't mean Tom only produces 3. He could produce 3, but he could also produce more. So again, marginal output is not a reflection of the ability of an added worker. I hope that makes sense. Another caveat is, remember at the beginning of our slides, what I said was, let's have a look at what happens when we increase one factor of production. And we chose labor. Why labor? Because labor is easy, right? You add an extra worker in and then it's much easier for you to see it. However, our analysis applies to any factor of production, as long as, once again, that Latin phrase, ceteris paribus, meaning all other things being equal. So for example, let's say we've got one worker here named Bob again, and this time instead of adding Tom in, and of course he has his first grill, we add a second grill in. Okay, so basically now what happens here is, okay, so let's review our factors of production. Bob is labor; he's a labor input. Whereas the grills, these are capital, right? So we increase the number of capital that we have, but we don't increase the number of labor. So again, changing amount of capital and labor does not change. So what have we done here? We've increased capital, but the rest we've kept constant. So again, and the same analysis applies. law of diminishing returns applies here. So when you do this analysis, you will see that the more grills that you have, the less the marginal output becomes. Okay, and it's the same whether you're doing this for land, you're doing this for entrepreneurship, it's going to be the same. As long as it's only one thing that you're changing, not all of them. Okay. However, the caveat is changing capital may be difficult in the short run. I hope you remember that. For a grill, it's not too big, right? It's probably more expensive than hiring another person, granted. But later on, we'll see. Let's say if you got an oil refinery, we'll have an oil refinery coming up later. Imagine these large plants, large equipment. It's not easy. You can't just whip that up in a day. There's long-term planning for that. So in the short run, changing capital may prove difficult, especially even in the burger setting. Let's say you've run out of space because of you've got your production up, but you can't serve enough customers because there's no seating capacity. So what do you do? Oh, we can rent a new building. That you can't do that in a single day, right? You actually need to plan that ahead. So again, changing capital or changing even land may be difficult in the short run. Again, and this is another caution. So this is not mentioned in your textbook, but it's just for some added learning. Sometimes more workers can increase productivity, and anyone who's played this game definitely assure you of that. As much as it is painful for any of you guys who played this game, as much as it is painful working with your friend on trying to deliver food to the customers, imagine doing that alone. Yeah, it's not going to be easy. All right, so yeah, so just again, sometimes more workers can increase productivity. So why does that happen? Imagine if we got a Bob. Instead of having one grill, you got four grills. Bob's really gonna have a hard time there, basically, right? Trying to manage all four grills at the same time. So this is where an additional worker might actually help out because that means each worker can have two grills. So definitely production will actually increase. So again, this is just a caveat that this is actually a possibility. And in reality, the marginal product worker curve looks more like this. It's more parabolic in nature, meaning it goes up, hits a maximum. So this is the maximum number, the um, maximum marginal product that we get, and then it starts decreasing. So so what we've captured in the analysis before is just this bit. But actually, in the beginning, if you've got way more of one factor than the other, increasing other factors might actually increase the marginal productivity at first, and then it hits a peak, and then it goes down all the way to zero. I hope that makes sense. And again, this is just a random example. Um, this is just as an illustration, okay? Oh, what happens then? So we've analyzed what happens if we increase just one factor of production. What happens if we increase multiple factors of production at the same time? Okay, um, it's not that easy actually. So let's say we've got Bob and we've got Tom. So there's two of them now. So we increase the number of laborers, workers basically, and we've also increased the number of capital, which is the grill. Assume we've also increased, say, land, the number of ingredients that we have, and entrepreneurship at the same rate or something like that. So also assume that. So what happens then? It's not as simple as you think. So first of all, we know productivity will go up. More burgers will be produced. But by how much though? That's a different question altogether. Yeah, so there's a question mark there. So first scenario is one that we could think of simply. Well, if Bob can produce five burgers with one grill, and Tom imagine it's the same ability, the grill's same, then we can assume Tom produces five more burgers, right? So 5 is to 5. So productivity, it's just a direct increase. If I had 5 burgers before, I'll now have 10. If I had, let's say, 20 burgers before, I'll now have 40 burgers, right? That's the first scenario. And this is possible, and most of the time this does happen. Sometimes, though, might actually increase your productivity because, let's say, I don't know, there's some sort of step where Bob and Tom can work simultaneously together, and then suddenly you've got more than double. So instead of having just 10 burgers, from 5, you now got 12. So that's a possibility as well. A third possibility, so again, because first possibility, say it's just doubles the amount. Second possibility, you more than double the amount. Third possibility, less than double the amount. So in burgers, it's a bit difficult to think why this would happen. So, but in other businesses, it might actually be a bit easier to discern why you get less than double. Let's say for, I don't know, let's say you might sell less than the normal. There might be not enough demand for it, so you actually end up selling less than double, right? So that's a possibility as well. So yeah, this is what we call returns to scale. So basically, scaling up means we increase all factors of production. Let's move to the next slide. So there we go. Scale refers to increasing process of production. So all of them at the same time, not just one, but all of them. So production increases, definitely, right? There are some, as I have summarized, we have 3 scenarios by how much. So basically, it's either or not. If we double, so we usually double as a benchmark. So if we double the inputs, if it's the same, if we double the inputs and the outputs double, we call that constant returns. Because I add 5, I get 5 more. If I had 5, I get 10. If I double everything, we can also have decreasing returns. Well, if we double stuff, if we double the inputs, we get less than double the outputs. So yeah, and we can also have increasing where it's different, where we actually become more productive by increasing the inputs. All right. So let's do it schematically. So here's what we have. So imagine if we got these 3 here, then we got 1 times of goods and services. Now, if we double that, okay, if we got constant, then that means that will be exactly equal to 2 times the goods and services that we usually get. In decreasing, that means we get less than 2 times. In increasing, we get more than 2 times. I hope that's simple schematic. Shows you what it means. Shows you how these things work. Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at briefly at cost. So will producing more burgers today affect the following costs? The raw ingredients to make burgers. Well, surely, right? Because the more burgers you want to produce, the more raw ingredients you need. Let's say lettuce, ham, burger, actual patties, or something like that. So if you want to make more burgers, you kind of need to have more ingredients. So you need to pay more for those ingredients, right? Because you'd have more. What cost to hire extra workers? Well, again, if you want to increase your productivity, and that's as much as your current workers have, you might have to dole out the money to hire more workers. So this is going to affect. So right. So if the more burgers we produce, the more money it will take for us to hire extra workers. How about electricity to power the restaurant lights? Just the lights. I've been very careful here to say lights and not electricity bill because the grill also works on electricity. Let's look at the lights. Well, the electricity bill for the lights will be the same. It doesn't matter whether you produce 5 burgers or 20 burgers. If you open up for the day, you're going to be using lights, and it doesn't matter how many burgers you have, right? So the cost of that will not be affected by the number of burgers that you have. Okay? So that's basically what we call fixed, right? So it's a fixed cost where that doesn't change the with the number of burgers you have. But the rent for the restaurant place. Well, usually we pay rent on a monthly basis, and again, yeah, that doesn't. If we make 100 more burgers a day, that won't change the price of rent. It'll still be the same. So that's also fixed. And how about the interest on debt repayments? Well, again, you've already agreed to how much you'd pay. You'd pay monthly for your debt, right? So it doesn't matter how many burgers you make. Your debt repayment plan will still be the same. Okay, so that's also fixed. And I hope that gives you some idea of the following costs. So we showed you 2 types of cost. So you got fixed costs, so that was the electricity for lights, the rent, and the debt repayment. So these costs do not vary with the quantity of output produced. So you can produce as many burgers as you want, fixed costs will still be the same. And there's also variable costs, where the more of the inputs the more product you want to make, the more expensive this will be. So raw ingredients comes into mind, labor comes into mind, all right? And the total cost, if you want to find out how much your entire business or operation is costing you, you just sum up the fixed and variable cost. Okay, so again, I said not a lot of maths, so I'm not going to do an example for this, but yeah, that's the formula. Fixed cost plus variable cost equals total cost. All right, I hope that makes clear. And so let's move on to an oil refinery case study. This will be a quick one. So this is at the Tabangao refinery in Batangas. The Shell used to be. Now it's just an import terminal. Beautiful place, by the way. Well, as a chemical engineer, I find it beautiful. Anyways, so imagine, just look at these things. All right, this is from an aerial view. It's beautiful, but just look at how big these storage tanks are. Look at how big those equipment are. All right, so imagine, and when I say what can you do in the long run, and I mean by long run like 10-20 years into the future, not like a year. Okay, so what can you do in the long run that you cannot do in the short run? Let's have a look at that. First of all, you can build additional large scale equipment. You can build more of these tanks, right? Given enough time, you will be able to build that. So that actually becomes a flexible thing. You can build a new plant. You can build a whole new of this somewhere else, right? So that's something you can do in the long run that you can't necessarily do in the short run. You can decrease a plant's capacity by decommissioning equipment. So decommissioning means shutting off equipment and actually scrapping it. So you can shut down these things, but it won't happen in a single day or even a single week. So that's a long run thing, right? You can do that in the long run, not in the short run. You can also scrap a plant. So this is literally just the opposite of building a new plant. Instead of where you basically just say take down the whole thing, similar to what we've basically done here with Dabangao, where we basically stop refining stuff and just start importing stuff using with this with equipment here. So you can also scrap a plant, and again, this is all long run. You can end rent agreements, right? So remember I said the monthly contract. Usually the contracts depends on for a house, usually for personal stuff it's a year or so, but for businesses sometimes it's 10 years, 20 years. So you can end rent agreements, you can start new agreements, but again, this is all long run stuff. You can completely pay off your debt. That's simple enough. So a certain time frame, a cost can only be either a fixed cost or a variable cost, so it's one or the other. In the short run, however, and this is where we saw with the burgers example, some costs are fixed, like the electricity, the light, the building, and all of that, while others are variables. However, in the long run, all costs are variable and not fixed. That means in the long run, all of them can be changed. Okay, so for example, if you want to sell more burgers, you can build a new restaurant, but that's a long run thing. So capital usually is a fixed cost in the short run, but in the long run it becomes variable because you can build more. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So last one, profit maximization. The profit is the difference between the total revenue and total cost. So money in minus money out. Yeah. So remember, profits are the entrepreneur's income. So what does an entrepreneur want? Probably wants to maximize this thing, profit, right? So the goal is profit is equals to total revenue minus total cost. We can do that either by increasing our total revenue or decreasing our total cost. Simple as that. Okay. What is business primary goal? Maximize profit. And this was an idea posed by Milton Friedman, and you can read this magazine article. It's available online if you Google social responsibility of businesses to increase profits. Now, in the next session, when we talk about business, the different types of business operations, this may or may not be true. However, at least for Milton Friedman, who by the way was a Nobel Prize winner and he's one of the most foremost economists of the past 50 years, by the way, this is what he argues for. So if you want to, if again, or this is optional reading, if you want to dive deep into this, want to dive deep into super heavy capitalist literature, this is definitely recommend. But yeah, okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Now, there is some bonus content after this if you want to continue listening, but for the rest of you, have a good day. All right, thank you for sticking around for the optional content. So we said, so the question now is, what is the optimal amount to hire, or even like what's the optimal amount of goods to produce, right? Yeah. So remember from the previous slide we just did, the profit is equal to the total revenue minus the total cost. And if we want to increase profit, if we want to maximize, we need to get revenue as high as possible and total cost as low as possible. Simple in principle, hard in practice. So imagine if we hire Harry, again, right? You kind of have to pay Harry to work, right? I do not advertise modern day slavery and do not, so we need to make sure he's paid a good wage, okay? So you pay him a wage in order for him to work. But that increases total cost, right? That increases total cost. But he does produce more burgers, and if you sell these burgers, that's increasing total revenue. So you notice that there's this tug of war, right, between the increase in the total cost, which we want to decrease, and the increase in total revenue, which we do want to increase. So what happens now is there's this tug of war for profit, where if we hire an extra worker, sometimes the total cost will increase, but the total revenue will also increase. So what's the key here? It's the size of increase that counts. The total revenue is greater than the total cost. We'll represent this by arrows just to make things nicer, right? So total revenue is much higher than the total cost. That means the additional cost incurred by hiring Harry is covered by the additional revenue that we get from all the burgers that Harry makes. So it would make sense, right? So profit would actually increase, and it would make sense to hire Harry, right? However, let's look at the opposite. If total revenue is less than the total cost, then we'll get this. Well, profit, where the total revenue is smaller and total cost is much higher. So that means that the additional cost will eat up not only our revenue, but eat up our profits as well, which will give us a decrease in profit. So the key here is how big is the increase in total revenue compared to the increase in total cost. And notice what I said here, the increase in total revenue, the increase in total cost, i.e. at the margin of hiring Harry. And we'll have a look here what we mean by higher until the additional profit is zero. So again, we have so if we increase the increase of hiring Harry to our revenue, that's what we call the marginal revenue. Okay, so the increase to the total revenue at the margin, right, is the marginal revenue at the margin. It is the additional revenue that we get at the margin of hiring Harry. And there is also the marginal cost, that is the additional cost to hire Harry. Okay, so remember, so we want to make the marginal revenue bigger than the marginal cost. But however, remember that because of the law of diminishing returns, we get less and less marginal revenue for each marginal cost, because marginal cost is fixed, right? The wage for Harry and for other people will be the same. However, the amount of burgers they produce and hence their revenue will go down. So there will come a point, which is the break-even point, when the marginal revenue becomes equal to the marginal cost and the additional profit will be zero. And so that's when we know we've hit the optimum. Because if we hire more, we start losing our profits. If we hire less, that means there's still some profits that's positive that we can't capture. So, lesson, we hire to optimize a business model, we hire until the additional profit is zero. And that's it. That's the bonus material and optimization. What is the optimal amount to hire when additional profit is zero? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost.